Hey everyone, it's Alex, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. And if you'd like to support my content, consider hitting that subscribe button as we make our way to 100,000 subscribers, guys. We are almost there, and we can't do it without your help. So check to make sure you're subscribed. And then as we dive into our top 10, there's something worth noting here. We actually have two decks here, the ones with the Carnage card backs, that I'm utilizing in the top 10, but it's worth noting that they don't have a lot of games on them, so their statistics are a little bit in flux. We try to get as much of a game sample as we can when discussing the top 10 decks. These two are very high performing decks, but they don't have a lot of games on them, although they've been on the list in the past. So I'm comfortable showing them to you, but I just want to give you that caveat that Wiccan Ajax, while being very high performing, has not seen a large sample of games, so the statistics may vary quite significantly. But this is a deck that's honestly been very good, and what's most fascinating about this deck is obviously the 0.35 cube rate, which has been pretty consistent over the last several months. It is honestly, it's Ajax performance with Luke Cage. First time that Ajax came out, no one was playing Luke Cage with him. Everyone wanted to send Ajax through the roof into the high 20s and do all these combos and everything, and it has kind of come to pass that you don't need him to be that big. As long as he's hitting numbers similar to Gilgamesh, which he does very consistently, you're okay with Ajax just being a big body. Run the Luke Cage, utilize the Juggernaut as a surprise play on turn 6 to knock something into the US Agent lane or potentially even into the Cosmo lane. It's pretty interesting what these cards can do. The power output is pretty impressive. The amount of disruption is also impressive. And you have that Wiccan byline as well, which lets you set up these pretty fascinating combos. Overall, I like this deck a lot. I've been playing it a little bit, and I like it from a standpoint of it just hammers your opponent, and it has a very well balanced approach of attack. It's worth noting though, Shadow King is a little bit tricky to use if you're using Hazmat first. Just note that Shadow King plays very well into like the Man-Thing or the US Agent, but it will negate the Hazmat. So you often want to use Shadow King before your Hazmat in the event you're going to be using it. Just bear that in mind. Number 10, which is Wiccan Ajax. Go to number 9, and this is again a deck we've talked about in the past. Now, what's interesting about this list is it has a low win rate, 51%, not usually high enough to make this type of list, but it has a very strong cube rate at 0.42. It's also worth noting that it has a very low play rate currently, and so I wanted to include it because perhaps you guys can raise that win rate up. But this was a deck we talked about a couple weeks ago. This idea of playing, Onslaught on top of Sarah and basically just dumping your entire hand. In my experimentation with this deck, a low-key winner of this deck is honestly Strong Guy. It's a very consistent power play. And Rogue. Rogue is so good. We're seeing a lot of ongoing out there, especially with the amount of Iron Man that's being played in the Agent Venom decks. And then, so Iron Man's often coming down on turn 5, so it leaves it vulnerable to Rogue. And those decks don't tend to run other ongoings, generally speaking. Sometimes Mystique, but hey, that's a whole other conversation. That's technically a non-reveal, Alex, but you know what I mean. Long story short is Rogue often makes easy pickings of these Iron Men that are currently in the meta with the Agent Venom decks, and so I found it to be a cube stealer, which might even explain why the cube rate's much higher than the win rate here. But anyways, a very fascinating deck. It's running no 1 or 2 drops. It goes all in on getting that Sarah Onslaught play going, and it's fun. It's a very fun, unique way to play Marvel Snap. Going to 8, we got Move. We've got Move. Now, Move has been like hovering around the meta ever since Madam Web and Aranya came out, and this is performing really well. It's still a 55% win rate, which is a little on the lower end, and a 0.37 cube rate, which is great. Anything above 0.30 is solid, and 0.37 is very strong. I like the addition of Cosmo here, and honestly, in my experimentation with this deck, I'm not the most, I don't love playing Move, honestly, but I feel like Eliath is just incredible in this list, okay? Because it often negates their play to attempt to disrupt your massive Human Torch or whatever. It's really helpful in terms of kind of making a turn 6 play that can protect your board. Cosmo does the exact same thing. Play Cosmo into a lane and hide your Human Torch behind it. And then when you have initiative, it's unlikely they're going to be playing their on-reveal cards or any cards into the Cosmo lane, generally speaking. And so it allows you to kind of better and more accurately aim your Eliath, because it's unlikely they're going to be playing in the Cosmo lane. Yeah, they still might. They could throw an Iron Man there or whatever, but I think that it helps to aim your Eliath and give you a little more confidence, which would be extremely disruptive. And this deck often has initiative, especially with the likes of Vulture. You move Vulture once, he's likely winning a lane by turn 5 or 6. So I do like this deck. Not the biggest Move fan myself, but if you are, this is currently one of the absolute top performing ones. And it's pretty interesting to see that this is kind of crawled out from the cellar after the changes we saw in the most recent OTA. Agent Athena. We're going to be talking about Agent Venom a lot. Agent Venom continues to be absolutely cracked, and it's absolutely cracked in this deck. I mean, it has a lot of the cards that you would come to expect, as we talked about the Mystique Iron Man combination. This one actually runs Rogue, which is a bit of an interesting splash here. It does have Bast. Now, this is fascinating because I see an Agent Venom deck without Bast. Sorry, an Agent Venom deck with Bast without Mysterio. And I actually cross-referenced to see if Mysterio made the win rate higher, and it actually didn't. This one is outperforming the Mysterio version right now, which I found to be kind of interesting. And so if you're missing a card from this deck, I would consider, like if you're missing Silver Sable, for instance, who's still awesome in this deck, you could go something like a Mysterio. That's just something worth noting. The Kitty Pryde into the Athena plays are pretty good. I mean, Athena's still a fantastic card, and in my experimentation with this deck, I was putting up very consistent power. I still don't like the Claw change, though. I still feel like Claw took like a unnecessary stray. I think it's still a good card naturally, but that 8 power that it was beaming off to the other side was just so much better. It's just so much more confident and so much more impactful. Still a good card, but anyways, a lot of weight being carried here by the Agent Venom. Honestly, Agent Venom absolutely crushes with Mystique Iron Man. It can hit stuff like the Athena, of course. Cassandra Nova loves it too. It's just a great deck and one you can turn to if you're looking to rank up, with a very impressive cube rate at 0.44. That takes us to number 6, and it's been Scream. Now, Scream's win rate has been pretty consistent in the high mid to mid 50s, 56 this week. Its cube rate has been starting to wane, though. It had a much higher cube rate in the past, now 0.29, and a pretty solid sample rate of games. Like, we're talking almost 1,000 games on this particular deck in only a couple days, so got a good sample size. I honestly think that the changes they made to Juggernaut still feels really bad. I started playing this deck again. I still don't think Cannonball is great here. Like, yeah, you move a card, but you're not destroying it, and you're not like, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of disruption, but it's not necessarily, I think, what you're looking for all the time. Magneto still feels like a little bit of cope here and there. I don't know. I'm not a fan of what current Scream is, but although I do recognize that Scream is actually in a pretty solid spot. Like, these are good win rates, but the cube rate's starting to suffer. Anyways, this deck is still out there. I think it's starting to wane in popularity, but it still hits number 6 on this list via its win rate. We go to number 5 here, which I can't click there. Number 5, Toxin Monkey. Toxin has been very good, and it's not the last time we're going to be talking about Toxin in this top 10 list. And this one here is the Hitmonkey version of the deck. It runs Shadow King. Shadow King is very strong in these lists. Just be very cognizant of how you play Shadow King. You're not playing Shadow King on top of your Toxin or anything like that, right? I really do like Nico in this deck as well. Nico gives you a lot of optionality with regards to like copying your Sage and then bouncing that back and having an additional Sage, or copying your Toxin or whatever. Like copying these cards that have high impact abilities. Even something as simple as the Rocket Raccoon, copying that Rocket Raccoon and then bringing it back to your hand buffed, or even Silver Sable, which is a consistent effect. Honestly, it's remarkable how good Nico is in this deck. Falcon making it, Beast making it, and Toxin. You got 3 bounce options, and they can bounce each other to some degree, right? Like Beast and Toxin can bounce the Falcon, Toxin can bounce Beast. So like, there's a lot of synergy here. It's not the top performing Toxin deck, but at a 0.31 cube rate and a 57% win rate, it's a solid one, and I'm glad that Black Swan is making some decks here, and it's legit. Black Swan's actually pretty good in those lists. Number 4 is Agent Sarah at a 58% win rate and an astonishing 0.59 cube rate. Remarkable win rate and cube rate here. And I like this a lot because it actually runs an Invisible Woman. This is a new take on the type of Agent Venom style decks. You do have the Hitmonkey, you do have the Bishop, you got the Mysterios, but you're running Sarah and Gwenpool with the Red Guardian. This is really interesting, and it's a bit of a unique take here, and there are some cards that, like, you know, you obviously can't put behind Invisible Woman, like, don't put Sarah or Gwenpool behind Invisible Woman. Killmonger is the bigger winner here. So if you play Invisible Woman, and then you play Killmonger, it's guaranteed to reveal at the end of the game. The result is that these bounce decks that we're seeing so often, which are very meta prevalent, they will reveal all their stuff. Everything will be on the board. Sorry, not the Hitmonkey. I mean, Hitmonkey obviously gets smoked by the Shadow King, but it's the Silver Sable, the Rocket Raccoon, the Demons, and stuff like that. Killmonger just wipes them out completely, right? And so that's why you're running the Invisible Woman. Very, very good tech. This is more of a meta call than anything else. Once bounce starts to kind of wane a little bit, you're going to see this deck fall out of the meta. But right now, if you're playing Bounce and you see Invisible Woman and a card behind it, it's going to be Killmonger. This deck is stealing cubes right now because it's a great meta call against what people are currently playing with Toxin. That takes us to our top 3. Now, I can't believe it, but the buff to Misery has finally just given us one deck, at least one deck, that propelled it into the top tiers here. And at number 3, a 59% win rate and a 0.48 cube rate. This is no joke. It's also a very interesting take on Phoenix Force, because what you're doing is you're kind of taking some of that power that gets destroyed by Misery, you play the Phoenix Force, and you bring a little bit of that power back. It's a way of saying, okay, yes, I destroyed the Black Widow, but now I'm going to Phoenix Force that Black Widow, get the effect, and actually reabsorb that power. So you Black Widow, you Misery, and then you Phoenix Force, right? And your opponent's like in shambles, basically, right? It's pretty fascinating what you can do with this list. And Zabu can obviously be Misery as well, which obviously double procs the idea of like making that Rock Slide cheaper. It's a really fascinating list because like Rock Slide actually performing in it. You got the Zabu for the Rock Slide, the Phoenix Force, and the Misery. My personal brew of this, I was actually running Shang-Chi as well, but I can see why you would cut it. I do see the Grandmaster here being a great backup play to not pulling Misery and trying to make the most of the effects that you have available to you. It's just an interesting deck, honestly. Misery Hood's great, by the way. Huge fan of it, and if you want to give it a shot, now's the time, because I just think it's working, and you're going to catch people by surprise. Like these stats are no joke. Very impressive deck. Number 2, Toxin by Night. Werewolf by Night actually legitimately making a bit of a comeback here, and it's to my surprise. I find Werewolf by Night currently pretty clunky, but at a 60% win rate and a 0.35 cube rate, the deck and its statistics speak for itself. Yes, we still have the Toxin here with the Agent Venom. I like the splash of Spider-Ham in this deck as well, a little bit of added disruption, and a cheap card that can be bounced back and forth, although I tend to prefer Iceman in these decks over Spider-Ham, because Spider-Ham usually is just going to repeatedly hit the same card, whereas Iceman is just dismantling their hand as it comes back and forth. That's my personal call. If you want to cut Spider-Ham, or if you don't have Silver Sable, Iceman's a great call in here. But overall, this deck's performing well. I can't argue against it. I'm not the biggest fan of Werewolf by Night. The statistics don't lie, though. The statistics simply do not lie. Werewolf by Night is back, doing a great job here, and it is the number 2 deck of the week. And that takes us to our number 1. And you guys are gonna be pissed. Oh man, okay, let's just rip the band-aid off. It's a Scorn deck. It's a Scorn deck, and this always happens, right? It's like the card leaves the spotlight caches, and then like it ends up being like one of the top performers in the given week, and then people are like, "God damn it, I let it go. Why didn't anyone tell me?" For the record, I did say I like Scorn a lot. I had said I love Scorn a lot, and Scorn is doing great in this particular deck. A 61% win rate, a 0.52 cube rate. I don't know what happened here. I didn't expect this. These are untapped, top 50% infinite stats. There's about 580 games on this deck when I checked it. Seriously, it's just performing. I like the Gambit Splash here as well. It's got the approximate Midnight for the hit on there. It's running Swarm in addition to Scorn, which honestly, I was not expecting to be a combination that we would be seeing a lot of success with. I felt like Scorn and Swarm were like one or the others, but here we are, not only running Scorn, not only running Swarm, but we've got Meek with it too. So it's a really fascinating take on Destroy, and statistically one of the absolute best you can play right now in Marvel Snap. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate every one of you, and we'll see you on that next video.